The first question is salesperson Speedy Stevie just got his license. Wanting to gain customers through social media, he offers a chance to win a $50 gift card if potential customers like and share my Facebook page. Anybody want to take a stab at the answer?
No violation.
Anybody else?
B.
Violation, price is an inducement.
Yeah, that's right, Chuck.
Well, that's a guess too, so.
Yeah,
Wow.
they're seeing that as a contest. And you know, we do things sometimes, like we had an event here at the Wildwood office last year where we said we're having a drawing for a gift basket if they filled out an email. But the social media thing, you have to be really careful because anybody can send that to the MREC and it must be quickly. So if you would either call Mary or myself before you have a contest of any sort, or let's just call it a drawing of any sort, call us and let's talk about it first, okay?
I actually did an ad for somebody where we offered a $100 gift card to Annie Guns if they would like or share on Facebook.
Was it for a real estate agent?
Yes.
Was
could
that
show it.
recently?
Can you? I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, let me see. I can't see it.
I can't move my
How
computer.
recent was that?
I don't know. I guess a couple years ago.
Yeah. This is this year, and this is a real scenario that I took. So I thought I would share that with you because we tend to, you know, we want to get more likes on our Facebook page. That's a good way to get caught.
Interesting.
Okay, so here, here's your answer. Okay, so question number 2. You represent the seller in a transaction. The buyer and seller have agreed to the terms and you have a contract.
You represent.
I'm hearing feedback.
That's a lot of feedback.
Somebody,
I am too.
can you guys mute, please? But if everybody could mute, that would be great. Okay, 2 weeks later, you receive another offer. Are you required to present the second offer to the seller? Steve is nodding yes. Anybody else? Steve, unmute and tell us why.
You got to present all offers to seller, no matter what.
Right.
Unless the seller instructs you in writing that he doesn't want anymore, but still, according to the code of ethics, you need to present it.
That's right, Kathy. So I kind of think that they came up with this policy or rule because what if it's under contract and they're still negotiating the building inspection and another offer came in? So it doesn't matter. I don't care if it's the day of closing, according to the MREC. Up until it closes, you're required to present all offers. Unless, like Kathy said, you have something in writing from the seller stating, I don't want to see any additional offers. Does that make sense? Yep, okay. Anybody have anything to add to that? Okay, so question number 3. The seller decides to accept the second offer as a backup. Are you required to notify the first buyer that you have a backup contract? Steve, you want to talk about that?
Unless you're instructed by the seller. The seller's the quarterback. I think I'm right.
You are right.
Um,
You are right.
Whatever the seller suggests, but I mean, you can kind of pit them against each other, but the seller's got the ultimate decision.
Right. And guess what? In this market, backup contracts are pretty common today. I'm seeing quite a few. And I encourage you to take a backup. But here is what the answer is according to the Missouri Association of Realtors. That is, realtors in response to inquiries from buyers or cooperating brokers shall, with the seller's approval, disclose the existence of offers on the property. So unless the owner or the seller approved or instructed the listing broker to disclose the presence of a backup offer, nothing would appear to require such disclosure made. So I think what could happen, what if the backup is for significantly more than the first offer? And you're not going to fix, you counter back with, we're not going to fix anything. If they thought you had a backup offer, they may go and say, we're not going to ask for anything to be repaired. So that could be the scenario for that.
Can you go back to, and let me see the question again, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So the sellers decided to accept a second offer as a backup. Are you required to notify the first buyer that you have a backup contract?
I was reading it wrong. I thought that there was a primary contract, and did you have to notify the buyer that you had or the primary contract that you had a backup? I misread it.
No worries at all. Carol, did you have your hand up?
I do. I have a question about that because on the form for the backup contract, it indicates that you need to put the date of the original contract that's been offered on that property. So unless the listing agent gives you that information that there's another contract, how would you even know that there is? And you'd have to know the exact date of that contract.
Right, so that would be the backup person that would need to know that. The primary, you don't have to tell the primary that you have a backup.
Okay.
Yeah, good question. Anybody else want to questions? These are some questions I went directly to the Missouri Real Estate Commission, or MAR, Missouri Association of Realtors. I thought these were good, and I like the backup questions because, again, we're experiencing a lot of that today. I hear somebody's talking in the background. I don't know if that's a question for us or is it background? Okay, I'm moving on to question number 4. Can a listing broker advertise a property as being the best school districts or have access to the best schools if the information's being used to determine best is derived from a third-party data source? We see this a lot out in West County, especially promoting best schools, best rated schools. Anybody want to?
I say no. I say no.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, I don't think you can do that either. No.
Okay. So I went to, according to, came from our legal hotline attorney. So advertising in such fashion would likely not be illegal per se. However, an advertisement may draw unwanted scrutiny as drafted and could be the topic of potential complaint based on the Code of Ethics. If the claim of best schools can be backed by a third-party information data, a more appropriate advertisement may be top-ranked schools per, and then name the source. So I have a source for you this morning. If you have a pen and paper, I'll give you a website that you might want to, if you're talking about best rated schools, and that they can go directly to the site. It actually gives the cap, like how many students per per teacher, per class. It gives all the ratings, and you're not the giver of information. So it's the letter D as in dog, E as in elephant, S as in Sam, E as in elephant, dot, M as in Mary, O, dot, gov, G-O-V, / school dash directory. And you can Google yourself too, you may find something different, but this is the Missouri School Directory. Because I think sometimes people do want to know, are the schools overcrowded? How many students per teacher, per classroom, that sort of thing? What their rankings are at a school district. And we really shouldn't be a provider of that. Any comments, questions, concerns? If you need to unmute, feel free to do that. Okay. Question 5. When are you required to disclose that you, as a realtor, have a personal interest in a property?
Every
Immediate-
time.
Immediately.
I don't need it.
Yep. Yes, the answer is immediately, and certainly before you're buying, exchanging, selling, leasing. The licensee shall disclose in writing any ownership which a licensee has or will have, and the licensee's status as a licensee to all parties in the transaction. And sometimes, you know, we put it in the MLS that we're related to the seller or we have interest in the property, but really what matters is what's on the contract. So make sure if you receive an offer that the box is checked that you're a party to the transaction.
Hey, Lynn.
Yep.
Jose here. Good morning, everyone. Question in regards to this. Now, because we're dealing with a lot more of our actual agents coming in and buying and becoming, you know, investors, rehabbers, landlords, you name it. Let's look at the pros and cons. Pros, obviously, if you do it this way, you're not going to be, fined or in trouble or anything like that. But what happens if you don't and your transaction goes all the way through? What's the reprimand to that? If you can let them know.
Well, if the buyer gets, let's just say they're mad about something, immediately they'll file a complaint with SLAR, with MREC, and that would be a violation. If there's a financial, it could lead to legal litigation too, because it is part of the contract now. I don't know what anybody has been fined, or SLAR could say, you know what, you need to take additional classes. Right. Yep. And it could be a fine too.
Hey, Lynn.
And what if they get an attorney, you know, then it could lead to that. It said that you had financial interest, you didn't disclose it.
And you have insider knowledge,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
As an owner, you have the ability to use that inside knowledge
Mhm.
to your gain. That's where they get you at. And can I interject
Yeah,
one comment too about a lot of times we'll see if you have ownership in a company and the company's purchasing the real estate, you still need to disclose if you are an owner in the company. If you have an interest in the company that's purchasing, you're still considered an interested party.
Correct. Absolutely. That's a great question, Jose. And I personally haven't had an agent get fined for that, but I hope we don't. I'm hoping that everyone takes this serious And make sure you disclose if you have interest in a
It's
property.
my understanding, Lynn, that it's a very serious offense, not a slap on the hand, kind of like, this would be compared, not as conducive as the, not having a proper lead-based stuff, but this is right up there to that effect, that if you're not disclosing, that you don't have any interest in that property, it's kind of like defrauding the transaction, not letting them know that you're a part of it, so.
Absolutely.
So it is pretty serious, guys, and that's the only reason why I asked it, because as I recall, we haven't we have dealt with an agency issue like this before.
It's
Oh,
been
okay.
many years, but we
So,
have.
and it's not, all I know from speaking to other colleagues outside of, in our St. Louis market that have run into this, that it's a very serious offense. So just keep that on the back burner, guys. I know it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. We obviously know what we're supposed to do, but this is very serious.
It depends on the issue relatable too. If it's something as far as an appliance that, wasn't working or whatever, versus a foundation crack that's been hidden, the dollars escalate by the value of what the issue is.
Yeah.
Right, absolutely. And that is why at one point, I think Kathy was serving on the Farms Committee with me at the same time when we decided to add on your sales contract, whether or not you are a party to the contract and what your relationship is to that transaction.
That's right. And the
Yeah,
contract
because
states
you-
under that relationship disclosure that we had put in there, the
Yes,
very first sentence says buyer and seller confirm that disclosure of the licensee's relationship was made no later than the first showing of the property upon first contact or immediately upon the occurrence of a change to the relationship. So you have to give them at least verbal knowledge that you have some interest in the property. And then if you get to the offer part, then you have to put it in writing.
right. Thank you, Kathy. So again, let's say you're listing a property and I'm in on a transaction with Jose, and I put in the MLS that I'm an owner, that covers me, that I've disclosed it in the MLS, but when it comes to the contract, you better make sure it's in there.
Contract supersedes everything, right? Lynn?
That's exactly right.
That's how you got to look at it, guys.
Okay, so we're gonna move on to question number 6. You have the buyer for 50 acres in Jefferson County. It is land only. You are writing an offer on a SLAR special sales contract. What else do you need to accompany the contract?
Well, that's a good question, and I know the answer, but I'm gonna leave you guys handle that.
Yeah, let's have the agents who wants to take a stab at that?
Go ahead, Carol.
You also need to do the land disclosure.
Perfect, yes.
Excellent, kudos.
Yeah. Woo-hoo. Yeah, so I asked Mary to be on the call today. I like her to be on anyway, but very specifically for this question, because this is an issue when it comes to E&O coverage, okay? So Carol was correct, but Mary, do you want to talk a little more
Yeah,
about
I do.
why? Okay.
I do. And so I guess let's just peel it back a layer and say that there's a lot of things that we do when you're doing the contract that are a part of the contract that you're doing, right? Disclosure of lead is vital, right? There's really no section on the contract that says you're going to include a lead disclosure or not to include a lead disclosure. It's a given, right? That to protect ourselves from the EPA issues and fines that are related to that outside of the MREC who governs our contracts, the board who governs our contracts and our ethics and our commission. Then we have the EPA and lead issues and everything else like that. When you get to a vacant land, a lot of people assume that if they say no seller's disclosure, they're done. But you said no seller's disclosure, but you didn't say anything about lead. You didn't include a lead disclosure for the land. The seller's disclosure talks about land. Is there anything buried on it? Is there anything toxic in your knowledge of? So if you have the buyer, you're representing a buyer and you don't get that, you're doing your buyer a disservice because, and we've had issues. We actually have a couple claims related to vacant land. So when we look at the contract, if you're representing the buyer, then you need to negotiate that vacant land disclosure when you're doing your contract, because once you've submitted and they've accepted and they say, no, we're not doing that. That's what we seem to run across multiple times. And I know Kathy's on here and she can attest to that as well. Because they do a lot of land out there. Now, what we do look at is if it's in a subdivision, right, and it's already been developed, they've already had to have done those soil tests, those, all that's been done, that's been looked at. Where it comes into a problem is, and you can't say that it's only rural areas either, because we have one in Oakville that is a sinkhole situation because they buried concrete in it to cover the sinkhole. We don't know. So, it's vital. The vacant land disclosure is the only thing left that protects the company and you from a claim situation. We're not talking about, is it, just the contract itself, what you have to do, but it doesn't, you're not protecting your client if you don't do it, if you have the buyer. If you have the seller and they didn't do it, it still comes down to people go back after people in litigation to resolve issues, big or small. The bigger they are, the more likely it's going to happen, and they're going to hang in there until something happens. And the only alternative is the buyer broker, or the seller broker, Obviously, if we don't have the seller, we don't want to take that liability for the seller side, but we have to take the liability for the side that we own. If you have the buyer and you didn't do it for the buyer, we're still liable for that. If he comes back, and God forbid, we always hope that they don't, but we never know where a claim is going to pop up from. So the only protection we have is that vacant land disclosure. And it's just vital to keep in mind that if you're doing a vacant land and a vacant land disclosure needs to be hand in hand. You shouldn't do one without the other.
So Mary, the place currently, we do not have the vacant land disclosure on our Farms R Us, our SLAR website.
Right.
That is not
But
available.
it is on the MAR side.
Yes. So I kind of stirred up some trouble yesterday among some other brokers, and is going to be put back on the table with SLAR the beginning of next year, that we have a vacant land disclosure for the St. Louis Association of Realtors. So make sure if it's not attached, you're writing an offer on a property, it's not, a vacant land disclosure is not attached to the listing, then what you need to do is in paragraph 23 or 21 now, the special agreements, right in there. This contract is contingent upon the seller providing a vacant land disclosure. Okay,
So on
Steve's
these
question, yeah.
On these two claims that we have, the scenario is that the vacant land on the one, it's probably a $40,000 sale, which isn't a big sale in your world and isn't a big commission in your world. But when they want that whole $40,000 refunded back, now it's a lot of money.
Right.
On the other scenario we had where there was stuff buried on the ground and they had to remediate that. So the cost to fix is where the problem comes in at. It's how to resolve, just like somebody with a foundation and you find a crack and you pull back walls and you find that they had a big crack that they covered up and hid. Somebody wants that resolved, right?
Okay, Steve, you have a question?
Well, I've got people looking for land, and the agent told me that there is barium that they harvested out of the smaller lake on the land. and I've been, looking up barium and all that, and I haven't seen her disclosures that she's saying that they were harvesting barium out of the lake. So she needs to have that in writing then, correct?
Absolutely. You betcha.
Right, what you just said, Steve, is disclosure, right?
Yeah.
You're aware, you're telling them, they acknowledge, the other side acknowledges that I know about it, it's there, you've told me. That's where our protection is. We could care less how they want to resolve it, if they want to resolve it, if they want to do whatever. What we want to do is make sure the acknowledgement piece is there.
Mary, I want to make it clear to everybody too, this just isn't out in Jefferson County. This could
Right.
be a city property that an
Right.
old home was built and torn down. That doesn't mean that there aren't remnants left.
An old cistern that they bury, motor oil, remember dioxin, guys, when people would dump all their, so the only really time that I'll let it fly is if it's like a subdivision that's being developed or something, I'm saying, or they have proof that they remediated, that they soil tested, something. You just need some kind of protection.
Yeah.
And it's on, what maybe, and, thank you, Lynn, for digging into this. She spent hours on this going, talking about it and getting it back on the table for the board to look at it. But maybe, we need a vacant land disclosure or a vacant lead disclosure, toxic something, but we need something.
Everybody clear on that? If this ever comes up and you're writing and you're uncertain, please call us. Happy to.
You missed that part. Steve was saying that he's got land and they're harvesting barium out of the pond, whatever that means. But
That's a metal, right?
Correct. It's number 56 on the periodic table. I Googled it. I don't know what it is. It is a metal, and I don't know what they used it for, but
It's used for those big old steel companies, the burners or crap or whatnot, something like that. I'm no genius, but I think I remember a little bit about it like that.
Sounds like EPA.
Right.
But that's exactly why we would want these disclosures.
Right.
I don't know, Mary had stated earlier, we are actually in an E&O issue with one of these type of deals. That's none of our agents, the previous agent that we had here. So as a company, we want to make sure that we're all aware of it. So Lynn has done some really strong work trying to identify all this stuff. So anyway, I'm sorry I keep coming in and out, guys. I'm trying to handle calls right now. I got an issue that we're trying to fill out, but that's a great one. Number 6
But
is great, guys.
I just want to remind you, because I think some of you might think this will never happen to me because I'm never going to go out to Jefferson County. I'm not going to do land. Trust me, you will eventually. I think, Tim, your last deal was land, right?
Well, hey, Lynn, I think that we've had a couple people even on the call that have experienced where somebody bought an extra lot.
Right.
It's
Still have that, right,
existing
Tim?
home and they add an additional lot. And now you come into that scenario that it's, it's a separate sale. But I think that, we do see it, city or whatever, like I was saying before, unless it was something that was pretty much somebody has already developed and know, but a lot of people in the older days would bury stuff underground, to get rid of it.
Hey,
Tim,
can I add
question,
something to
comment?
this? You guys, there's a thing called the Brownfield report. And if you Brownfield, if you look it up, it's where the government has indicated places where they're already aware of something toxic was on that. Like we sold a lot in Lafayette Square, looked it up, and it had been a gas station at some point 100 years ago. And it was on the Brownfield report. So it was right there. Toxic substances were there and no one had a clue. So
Did they leave the gas tanks in there, Randy, or did they remove them?
they didn't find any, but it cost, I don't know, it was $5,000 or $10,000 to do the exploration.
Wow. Okay.
But it's all there. It's public record. So if you do an empty lot, go right to the Brownfield report and just start there.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that. Is that all one word, Brownfield report?
I don't remember. If you
Okay,
Google it,
I'll
it
look it
will come
up.
up.
Thank you. Tim, did you have a comment?
I was
No.
gonna say, yeah, you can just Google Brownfield report for Missouri
Yeah,
and
okay.
it'll come up.
Tim? Did you
No,
have
I
a
didn't have a comment.
Okay. All right, so we'll go on to the next question, and that is question number 7. Under the municipal inspection paragraph, how many days does the seller have to notify the buyer if they are not going to repair an item?
15.
It defaults to 15, that's correct. And what happens if the seller cannot schedule the inspection in time and get it back?
Better do an amendment.
You extend it? Yep.
Right, so I want to talk about this a little bit because this has been an issue. Some of the municipalities, especially here in St. Louis County, are running on, they're short-staffed. And that means that they're running behind and several weeks, more than 15 days. So again, I'd highly recommend that when you list a property, you immediately find out and go ahead and get that inspection completed. Some of them are good for a year, some are good for 6 months. I think it would be good to get it done right away. So if the seller goes past the deadline, what happens?
They have to make all
Seller-
repairs.
Yeah, the seller's responsible. And just because you do an amendment doesn't automatically give you an out. They don't have to give you the extension.
Right.
So if you get a new listing, make sure you're checking into the municipality whether or not they require it. And if they do, how long are they out? But I would go ahead and get it done right away if it were me. Any comments about that? Anybody having trouble with municipal inspections?
Hey, Lynn, the beauty of doing it before you actually get a buyer on that property is that you can have somebody come in that, you know, is a handyman or something like that, rather than having to have a licensed plumber or a licensed electrician, which is what's going to be demanded on the inspection notice, most likely.
Right, thank
It
you
can
for
really
that.
save your seller a lot of money, and it's a good way to get them to do it. If you kind of tell them that it could be a lot less expensive. I've had really good luck lately doing it, and then Max Maintenance gets the list and they'll come in and fix it all. And my clients have been really, really happy with that. So it's worked out very well for me.
Great point. And I will tell you, if you get the municipal inspector in and he says the GFIs need to be, you know, GFI, new GFIs, whatever, some of those things your seller can do. If you get a buyer and they have a contract, they're going to say, we want a licensed electrician. And it's going to cost a lot more money. So if you get it done ahead of time, you won't have to deal with all those extra expenses. Thank you for that, Carol. Okay, so question number 8. Your buyer calls and tells you that they spotted a for sale by owner and they want to see it. They give you the for sale by owner phone number and you ask the seller if they will cooperate with the agent. With an agent, they agree, but will not list the property. What form do you need?
Authorization to show?
Correct?
Commission agreement.
Commission agreement.
Well, the
That's the
authorization
authorization.
to show is what you need, and that has your commission agreement, that has your commission on there, okay?
Commission
I-
agreements are broker to broker.
Correct. Yep. So what, I want to talk for a few minutes about what commission would you typically charge when you're only representing the buyer?
2.7 to 3.
Okay, good, good. Anybody else? I'm gonna tell you what I don't like is when I see 2%. I don't like that. And I'm gonna say that I would definitely try to talk the seller into letting me represent them. And the reason for that, because guess what? If you're only representing the buyer and you submit an offer to them and then you've gone through the inspections, the seller is definitely going to have questions for you. and you don't represent them. So you really shouldn't be answering them. So you could use that to your advantage. What, have you ever done that before, Randy? Since you answered the question, what, you ever tried to talk
Yeah,
to FISBO?
yeah, yeah, and I've had sellers refuse, and then you get down to, and you're like, I cannot answer you, I don't represent you, and then the sellers get upset, but that's the way it is. And you
Yeah.
have to tell them you weren't willing to pay the seller representation, so you seek an attorney if you have that question.
Great answer. Yep.
It pisses them off, but that's what it is.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
My other question regarding that is you're writing the contract. What box are you going to select under the seller, on the seller side? What box for representation, what box would you check?
That you're a buyer's agent if you have a buyer's agency and nothing signed with the seller.
That's right. So is that is a common mistake in our audits that we've seen occasionally where the agent checks that they're a seller's agent. You're not. If you're not representing the seller, you're a buyer's agent on the list side.
Hey, Lynn, can I jump in there?
Yeah, of course.
I think that is a bigger audit issue than people realize. We feel like they're only marking their side, right? But if there is no representation on the other side, you could be a seller's agent, buyer's agent, a transaction broker, but you wrote the entire contract, so you're disclosing that relationship for the entire contract for both sides of the deal, kind of thing, if you think about it that way. Just what capacity. So if you were a transaction broker, if you did off the show as a transaction broker, you're a transaction broker. If you did an off the show as a buyer's agent, you're a buyer's agent. Sometimes you're just writing the contract for somebody and it's whatever, however you got into the deal, that you're writing this contract for this one specific person. And, but remember, you can't write on an unlisted property. That's where the authorization to show comes in, that you have to have that form. But if you had a listed property, if you were the seller's agent and you were writing it for the seller, you had they knew the buyer or whatever, you'd be a seller's agent on the buyer section because you wrote the entire contract, but no representation.
Right.
Make
Any
sense?
questions? Okay, question number 9. You represent the buyer and they are requesting a lot of items to be repaired or replaced. The list is too long to fit in Part A of the inspection notice. What can you do? Andy?
You do an attachment or addendum.
That's the right answer. But here's the other thing I want to make sure that everybody's doing, that you have your buyer sign that attachment. So if you see attachment A and you list it in Part A of the inspection notice and you're doing a separate document, I want to see the buyer's signature on that list. Does that make sense? It's going to be on the inspection notice, but it also needs to be on the attachment. Because what if they say, oh, you forgot such and such? They're going to hold us responsible for that. So this is just kind of another one of those things that could get you in trouble at the end if something didn't get fixed, and they could say you overlooked it. Any questions about that? No? Great. All right, so here's our question number 10. You represent the buyer. In the MLS, the seller is asking for a special sales contract. Your buyer's comfortable using the special sales contract because the seller will have to make the repairs and replacements according to the municipal inspection. What should you always include with your special sales contract to protect your buyer? And I will tell you, this is a little bit of a trick question, so.
I
And
know the
inspection writer.
answer.
Kathy,
And inspection right.
that's one of them, yep. Who else? What's missing from the special sales contract that's normally in a regular sales contract?
Lots of stuff.
Disclosures. Municipality inspection.
That's it. Good one, Chuck. So I had somebody recently that wrote on a special sales contract and didn't realize that the seller doesn't have to do the municipal inspection because it's not in there. Yep, so that can be a problem because they think that, oh, well, a lot of that stuff will be called out, right, on a municipal inspection. And guess what? It's not in there. They don't have to do it.
One of the ways that has always helped me when I was dealing with a lot of the investors and a lot of the bigger firms that I represented is I always looked at the special sales contract as being a more favorable sales contract for the sellers, not buyers, right? It was always more favorable for the sellers to use a special sales contract in regards to it protects them a little bit more and it keeps them off of the liability of all the municipality inspections or inspections or having utilities turned on or anything like that. So that's one way to also look at it. Just make sure if you are involved in that and the sellers are required to ask you to do make the offer in special sales contract, go knowingly that you're going to have to get all these other addendums to protect your buyer.
Right.
Rather, sorry.
No, I love that. That's great. Anybody have any questions? I don't have a question, but if you go talking about municipal inspections, if you go back to the residential sale contract, under the governmental inspection, excuse me, paragraph, the default time is for 15 days for the seller to acquire it. But if there are instances where the buyer must apply for it, how many days do they have? Does anybody know? They only have
It's going to depend on the lender.
acceptance deadline date.
What was the answer, Kathy?
Within 4 days after the acceptance deadline date.
Okay.
Rarely do
That's
I
actually
see
great
where a
food for
buyer
thought.
has to apply for the municipal inspection.
Right, so it's just cautionary when you're using a special sales contract and you're accustomed to using a regular sales contract. You need to get it out, make the comparisons, make sure you've noted all the different, there's a lot of things that are not in there. Again, it's mostly for a buyer, and oftentimes a special sales contract was used for short sales and things like that. People don't have the money to fix anything, so you're right, it's more for the buyer, for the seller. So anybody have anything else they want to talk about this morning? Anything come up this week?
I'd like to, if I can just address something real quick, not in regards to contracts, but a little congratulatory, and I'm glad she's on the call, but I want to congratulate Carol Camarada for capping out this year. She has done an amazing job this year, even though 2020 has been a headache for everybody, but congrats on capping out, on maintaining your rep. Carol, we really do appreciate your hard work and efforts here at the company. Thank you so much. Give her a round of applause, guys.
Hey, Carol, is this your best year ever?
Chuck, and if I can't say a belated happy birthday to Mr. Chuck, that was, I believe, yesterday, right? So happy birthday, Chuck. And you might have
Thank
kept as
you.
well as what Mary says.
Yeah, Carol, is this your best year ever? You're on
You're on
mute.
mute, Carol.
You're on mute. Carol, you're on mute.
Yes, it was my best year ever. And thank you very much for the appreciation. It was kind of thrilling to get that all taken care of and did my heart good. It was very, very nice. Nice to be somewhere that you're appreciated.
That's awesome. Well, we definitely love you.
She's our Christmas
Thank you.
girl.
That's right. Hey, so now going back to this, guys, and maybe this is some food for thought, and, I always like to chime in here with just some input or maybe some suggestions or perhaps maybe some things that don't make sense, but that's okay. I'm not scared. But, we as real estate professionals, right, in our businesses, we get to the point where we get, pretty comfortable with the contract. So comfortable that when we're writing an offer and explaining it to the clients, 9 times out of 10, we're summarizing the contract. Am I correct? Or do you guys go word per word, letter per letter in the entire contract with your buyers? Let's be honest. And there's a reason why I'm asking this, right? Me personally, and I'll be the first one to tell you, when I was selling, I would summarize the contract. Okay, which means each section, I would summarize what each section basically stood for. Do you guys do that?
Yeah, pretty
Loaded
much.
question. Okay, here's why I'm saying this, guys, okay? It's probably of our best, our betterment here to consider going into this contract, and instead of summarizing it, maybe having when you're out there and you first meet your buyer, right? And you're talking to them, you're explaining the process, how it works. I would literally hand them a blank contract, right? So that they can read at their leisure. Because what you're gonna do is you're gonna summarize that at the time of contract. Why do I say that? Well, for one, you're gonna still explain to them the entirety of it's in contract in your verbiage, but you also don't wanna leave yourself open to liability because you are actually summarizing a sales contract. Right? Now, because everybody in this time frame right now is Sue crazy or Sue friendly, friendly, if you will, you have to be very confident in your ability and summarization of that sales contract. Because they're going off of what you're telling them, not what they're reading within their eyes, right? So it wouldn't hurt in your buyer consult, right? When you talk to them about what you do, what you offer, and guess what? We give you a blank sales contract ahead of time for your review. I will still go over it, but I'll be summarizing this contract, but it's in, I just put this in my packet to hand to you so you can review. So if there's any questions on your contract, I'll be more than happy to help you. Does that make sense? I mean, again, each one of you guys are deemed to do your business however you like. I'm just saying, and maybe I'm adding too much icing on top of the cake by doing so, but because we've seen these liability issues come up with E&O issues, it might not hurt to maybe consider something like that, right? I'm not asking you guys also to sit there and word per word, letter per letter, read it to your guys when they're signing their contract. By that time, you probably lost out on the house, right? But what I'm saying is maybe formally give them a sales contract. We can print those all day long and just hand it to them and say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, as a convenience, we also leave you with a blank sales contract, but this is what we're going to be filling out at the time we write out an offer. Feel free to read it at your leisure, because what I'll do when we're ready, I will summarize this sales contract and get you guys on paper to submit over so it can speed up the process of us getting your offer over to the other side.
Well,
Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Who agrees, who disagrees? And I'm okay.
in addition to that, that's why, if you recall, they added initials at the bottom of the pages because they want to be assured that your client acknowledges that they've read the page, kind of thing. So extra layer of protection.
It doesn't hurt. It's literally 2 minutes of coverage, right? 2 minutes of just explaining to them why you're giving them a blank contract. And really only it's just, and you can even write sample somewhere and just, hey, this is just for your review. This is simply to get us ahead of the game. So by the time we're ready to offer, we can summarize a contract, what you're filling out and signing, and we can get it out to the, out to the other side as soon as possible.
You absolutely need to write sample on that contract. All right.
Absolutely.
There you go.
Yeah,
And
it'd be
then-
good if we get one in the office that's already set up or whatever that you can
We
just
do
make
have
a
one
copy
here.
of.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'd also recommend that you
Mary
do
and the
that.
staff will handle that.
You should also have that contract in your listing packet so that
Yep.
your seller understands when you get an offer, this is what it's going to look like. Read
Yep.
it over. If you have questions, come back, talk to me about it.
Is there
It just,
a summary anywhere that you could give them with that?
Say that what, Neil?
Well, I'm just wondering, you said it's good to summarize it with them, but I'm wondering if there's also a pre-printed summary that you could
You don't
include.
want to do that, Neil. You don't want to
I
do
wouldn't
that.
do that
Only
at all.
reason why is because you don't want anything, your summarization of that contract could mean differently from someone else's summarization. So really, what you're doing, obviously, you as the real estate professional in your business needs to understand word for word what that contract illustrates. But when it comes time to summarizing, you're hitting all the major points, right, to speed up the process. But
Yeah.
that's why it's important that you hand them a copy, a sample copy of this contract. Like Lynn said, both listing side and seller side, right? It just makes you guys look even more professional. You guys are more professional, and you're letting your buyers and sellers be really involved and engaged in this transaction, instead of leaving it up to you and, oh, well, she said it's supposed to say this. Oh, but he said it was supposed to say this. I didn't know that. That's how you open up so many, especially now with the environment that we have, with everybody wanting to just engage on, oh, suing and this and that, guys. From the operational component of your staff and your company, we see these quite often. Lynn, this is not information that Lynn just grabs out of thin air. She investigates this. She researches this, because one way or another we've dealt with this. So what we're trying to simply do is bring this information to the forefront. So hopefully it helps prevent you guys from being in a liable scenario. The more you know, what do they say? The more you read, the more you know. Reading Rainbow. Who remembers that one? Oh, I didn't even see that.
That was Amanda.
Oh my God, we are literally like in cohorts here. I love it. All right. Sorry, I got excited. Look at this. That's when you know everything's all on one wild old machine. The more you know, reading Rainbow. All right, Lynn, sorry for sabotaging your meeting again.
No, we're
He
good.
gets excited.
All right, it's 11 o'clock. Thank you all for being here. Okay, have a good weekend.
Thank you, guys. Have a great weekend. Let's rock it. Let's finish up strong this year. Let's do it.
All right.
Take care.